Hello everyone, my name is Steve, and as you can see, I'm not out testing anchors. I am in project mode. In fact, it's been more than a month since I've tested an anchor, but that's about to change because I have now taken possession of my new anchor test vessel. So come around the corner and I'll show you what I got going on in terms of the modifications I'm making in order to make this boat the best possible anchor test vessel that I can conceive of and afford. Okay, the boat is a Hewescraft. The model is a 200 open Fisherman. That's 20 foot 6 inches overall for the hull. The beam is a little under 7 feet, but down here at the transom where it counts when you're on a plane, it's only about 5.5 feet wide. So it's quite a long and narrow boat, and it drives really easy. I did choose a 90 horse Yamaha. Actually, I take that back. I actually chose a 60 horse high thrust Yamaha, but due to the global COVID supply disruption, this was the anchor that I could get. In fact, it was lucky to get this one. There's a long waiting list for motors lately. Another delay in getting this boat delivered was the trailer. Apparently there's supply problems with getting trailers. In fact, the whole boat, I had to order this. It was back in February, I believe, and they just made my production slot there in May here. It's May 2021. So I'll show you what I'm adding to this test vessel for anchor test purposes. This is a 5/8 inch eye bolt. It passes clear through the transom, and then there's the same thing on the other side. They're spaced a little less than 3 feet apart, and a bridle will be attached to those. A very, very strong floating bridle. That'll come together about 4 feet after the transom, and that's where I'll affix the test anchors for both the high thrust pulling tests with the engine, the veering tests with the engine, and then more importantly, that's where the winch will be attached from the inside that's going to achieve the really super high holding power testing that I will achieve, again, using that truck winch. I've shown you that equipment before, but I'll now show you how it's all going to get mounted here in the boat. That big welded piece that I was working on at the beginning of this video, that's this piece right here, and what it's designed to do is transfer the load from those two eye bolts into the center line of the boat. This is the sensor for the load readout equipment that I have, and it'll be mounted in here like so. A large, I'm thinking maybe a 1-inch diameter pin is going to drop down through the weldment, through the eye, thus completely securing the load sensor without loading the boat at all. The load will transfer through this weldment and out to the anchor, again, without relying on any part of the boat's structure to take any of this up to 5,000 pounds of load. The winch itself is going to get mounted on a sort of a cradle that will be designed to be floating free in here. Thus, when the winch pulls against its rode, it will all of the force will transfer through the load sensor. So all it's going to get mounted back inside this area along with the battery. It's a real tight fit, but the door will be able to close. There will be a framework with sort of a fair lead sticking out into the cockpit here that I'll have to step over when I'm not using this equipment. But otherwise, this is all going to be quite concealed, out of the way, and hopefully I'll keep most of the salt spray off from it. This truck winch is not designed for marine use. However, what struck me about this particular brand is in their marketing material, they put this winch in a saltwater fish tank for, I believe it was a month. And then after that time, they pulled it out and it started right up. In fact, I think they even ran it underwater. So it's designed to be completely sealed. And they did use pretty good metals. I don't see any ferrous metals. It's all stainless and well painted or anodized aluminum. So if I coat this liberally with oil or grease and keep it tucked in here, I'm hoping to get many years of service, but time will tell. Battery's going to go here alongside. Again, winch right here in the middle. I've got to reroute a bunch of wires and stuff. It'll be quite busy in here. I hope to be able to reach under the winch to access the bilge area to keep it clean. So here's how this is all going to work. the winch is going to be pulling in on the dead man anchor, thus wanting to move the boat forward and thus pulling on the test anchor, which will be out the stern. The winch drum is not going to reel in that dead man anchor rod directly. It's going to attach to that rod first at a point up near the bow, and then it will pull in approximately 16, maybe 17 feet. When that connection point gets back to the winch, the rod will be belayed, back off on the winch just a little bit, undo the connection. Then by flipping the lever there on the winch transmission, the reel will just freewheel. So I'll just pull back out another 16 or 17 feet, attach to the rod at the new point, and then repeat that whole process. This is a fairly fast winch. I think it was 30 feet per minute. So I'm hoping that we don't spend too much time waiting when we're trying to pull in and take up slack and rod. But again, this is about the most economical way to produce very, very high holding power that I could find. That winch will also be used just as a general anchor windlass. I'm gonna build a roller frame that's gonna mount here onto the bow, and it's gonna be kind of comical seeing a lightweight 20-foot skiff with, you know, up to 50-pound full-size anchors on there. But this is how I will handle anchors in the future. That last vertical 30 feet of anchor retrieval is what really ruins my back. So that's where that winch is going to come in. I'll pull all the rods in by hand up until the point where the boat is directly overhead, and I'll attach that winch line to the chain and drag in the last little bits. This boat is designed primarily for fishermen. In here we have a fish hold, if you will, place for your catch. My idea is I'm going to store anchor rods in here. I'm going to have 3 different rods on board with different lengths of chain. I did pick up another 40-foot section of 3/8 triple B chain, so that's going to be added to some nylon and placed down here. This actually pulls out completely, the box included. I think I might take the bottom out of this fish box and let the chains and rods lie directly down on the bottom of the boat. This other smaller fish locker, I think I'll just leave this boat's anchor. Yep, this boat is going to have a permanent dedicated anchor. And which one did I choose for it? It's the 10-pound Bruce. As you can see, I ordered the boat without any seating. When I'm operating the boat, you just sit here in the back area, left hand on the tiller and a right hand for the boat there with that handle. The big question I have is, where am I going to mount the readouts that I need to see? And I'm thinking about perhaps a small little panel here kind of tucked under the gunnel. What I have to mount is a small GPS. This is the load sensor readout. That's just going to read out digital pounds or kilograms of pull. The tachometer for the engine's pretty important. It's over there on the other side, and that's great for just running around because the captain's kind of looking over that way anyway, maybe with their body shifted to port. So that's real visible. Even with the person sort of sitting there on the edge of that, I can kind of look behind them and see. However, it would be great to have all the information in one place. So that tachometer might get moved over here in sort of a cluster with these other instruments. I think the main electrical panel, that'll probably just stay right there. Fuel gauge, I don't see any problem with that. Prior to getting things all torn apart for the modifications, I did manage to get the boat out onto the water for a couple hours. The engine is still in the break-in period, so most of that was just idling. But toward the end, I was allowed to increase power get the boat on a plane, and as I said earlier, it drives really easy. I was a little concerned that the fairly shallow dead rise coupled with the light weight might mean this boat is going to pound terribly in chop, and I'll be honest, it does pound. That's just the nature of the beast, but it's really not too bad. I'm thinking that maybe that foam that's poured in underneath the floorboards and thus maybe giving some cushion to the hull, but it's also makes it pretty quiet. It just sounds and feels well, nice. That's the best way I can put it. Again, I didn't get a chance to open the throttle much past about 1/3. but the boat was planing real nice. I'm estimating about 20 knots. My purposes are not about speed. I'll be fitting a different prop eventually. It'll be a real flat pitched pulling type prop, similar to the one that I've been using on my father's test boat. The goal will be to pitch it so the boat can just plane along at about 20 knots. No need to go any faster, but then when the boat's not moving, it can produce just as much straight line pulling power as it can, shooting for over 1,000 pounds of thrust. You might have noticed the sort of homemade truck bed that we're looking at here. This is a vehicle I bought over a year ago just for the purpose of towing my boats around. It does tow my large sailboat Panoply around, but mostly it'll be used for towing this vessel. When I bought it, it was at an auction, and it was really only half a truck. It was just a cab and chassis, no bed at all. So here for the past month, I've been working on welding up this bed. And again, COVID has caused a huge increase in the price of lumber, so I just put some scrap in the bed for now, but maybe later I'll buy some nicer wood for it. But yeah, that was quite a project. In fact, I filmed virtually all of the metal work, so maybe I'll produce a video dedicated just to the construction of that bed. But that came out good. So there's not a lot of money wrapped up in that truck. I kind of went on the real budget for the truck, but I pulled out the stops on the boat. A brand new boat is a bit of a splurge. As many of you know, I do ask for donations for the anchor testing. I can report and will report that this boat was purchased with my money. All of the donated money thus far has been going toward equipment. Like for instance, I bought the rode for the dead man anchor and all the readout equipment and the winch. Bought numerous anchors. That's all been done with your donated funds, so thanks for that. Speaking of anchors that I've bought with your donated money, this is a brand new Rocna 20 kilogram or 45 pound roll bar Rocna anchor. Let's back up here. Previously I tested this second-hand 45-pound Rocna. The anchor performed terribly. I ended up performing a few modifications. The anchor got better, but it still wasn't great. But in order for me to continue testing Rocna anchors, I really needed a fresh copy that wasn't modified. In addition to the modifications, another problem with this anchor is it just had visible flaws, and I can report that the new anchor has improved in many ways. First of all, and perhaps the most important, the old anchor, if you recall, has this proud or protruding weld bead right across the fluke, and it's my new theory that you do not want any kind of a lip or edge in this very critical part of the fluke. The new anchor, that same weld joint has been welded or ground nice and flat, so that's improvement number one. Second improvement, if you remember, this shank is not only made with curved plate, I believe it was welded on in a misaligned way. I've gone ahead and laid out both of these anchors on the workbench with some careful lines, and this shank end is just shy of an inch off from center line with respect to the fluke. The new anchor, it's much better. It's only off by about 5/16 of an inch, so that's close enough to perfect in my book. Much better job of welding on the shank. The third noteworthy change is the weld fillet in the shank to fluke juncture. Here we see a generous fillet that's certainly plenty strong. And then on the new one, it's simply massive. They've just increased the amount of weld here by several times. And again, I don't think there was anything wrong with the strength of this. I believe they have added this simply to lessen the effects of mud sticking in between the fluke and the shank. I believe anytime you have an angle that becomes acute and then try to force mud along that, there's just a tendency for it to get hung up. By filling in this deep crevice, I just think that's going to have the effect of lessening mud sticking to the fluke. And again, I think it's just critical. We want that mud to keep moving by. So that may turn out to be a good mod. Another thing they did is they chamfered quite generously the leading edge of the shank all along the underside. They didn't do it to the top side, which tells me they may have wanted to relieve that flat face along there and thus allowing mud to slide by perhaps even better. So that's the fourth change. The fifth difference that I could find is in the tip weight. I like to tip anchors over on their sides and measure how much force is pushing down from the tip. And the new anchor, it's actually a bit more. It's 12 pounds where the old anchor was 10 pounds. Part of it comes from geometry. The roll bar is slightly, just ever so slightly wider on the new anchor than the other, and it just tips the anchor a bit more toward the tip. But I think more importantly, the plate thickness of the after part of the fluke is thicker on the new anchor than the thin anchor. It's very subtle. Probably just accounts for maybe a pound of total difference. But again, it's in a place where I think it's going to put more weight on the tip. The sixth difference that I could find between the two anchors is the chain attach hole. On the old anchor, the slot was very narrow and the shackle had a tendency to bind. There was even once in my test, I think it might have been in the cobblestone, that the old anchor may have been not setting as well because the shackle was in a position like this off to the side and just stuck. It could not move. The new anchor is far, far better. Maybe you can see it, but the hole is much, much bigger. This will take, you could put a 1/2-inch shackle in here, maybe even larger. This is a really nicely proportioned hole. There's no way it'll bind, and they chamfer the edge of it real nice. That's important because it'll likely help the galvanizing stay stuck to that otherwise hard corner. The seventh change that I could detect was the angle at which they ground the forward part of the fluke, thus creating a sharper tip. I won't try to get the camera down there, but it's just a different angle, and if you look at it in profile, we see a much, much sharper and just looks like a better shape for cutting into and slicing into a problem seabed. Last difference between the old and the new is really very simple. The old anchor is old and the galvanizing has a bit of roughness to it. New anchor, it's just slick and smooth everywhere. So I'm very anxious to test whether or not those 8 little changes might make the anchor perform better. And once I get that new test boat online, this is certainly going to be my first order of business. There's certainly a lot of room for improvement. This old 45-pound Rocna that I tested, golly, it's just one of, if not the worst anchor I've ever tested. I'll note that the 22-pound Rocna that I tested, it's also brand new when I got it, and it shares these sort of improvements with this new 45-pounder. It's actually not too bad of an anchor. I mean, it still was at the lower end of the other 20-pound range anchors, but it just wasn't terrible like this one was. So great opportunity to learn something coming up. Do stay tuned. Thanks again for the people who've been watching and donating. It's really making a big difference. I am back at work at my day job, so it's harder for me to just crank out all these videos, but boy, your support, it sure makes all the difference in the world. Thank you very much. So hopefully the next video will be an actual bona fide anchor test out on the water video. Till then, so long.